Okay, so today we're diving deep into one of the most well-known hauntings in American history.
Oh, yeah.
The Bell Witch.
Big one, right?
Huge. And we've got, a whole bunch of stuff to pull from.
Yeah, we've got the big Wikipedia article.
The Wikipedia article.
We've also got an article that kind of digs into, kind of the origins of the legend. And
yeah, like how it's been interpreted and stuff.
the theories around it.
So I think our mission today is to kind of like untangle, the core narrative from all the embellishments and the skeptical viewpoints and all that stuff. So,
Yeah, I mean, this is a story that really captures the imagination, right?
that's for sure.
It's been retold and reinterpreted for so long, and it really speaks to something like deeply embedded in the American psyche.
Totally. I mean, it's got all the elements right. You've got a specific time and place and family.
Yeah, it's all centered around this family, the Bells, and particularly John Bell Sr.
Right, a farmer living in,
Northwest Robertson County, Tennessee.
near what is now Adams, Tennessee.
Right around there.
And the haunting is said to have taken place between 1817 and 1821.
Yeah, those crucial few years.
Those crucial few years, yeah.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just the Bell family that was affected either. It was like the whole community.
Right, this close-knit 19th century rural setting.
Which makes it even creepier.
Oh, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. And, as with a lot of these, like, enduring legends,
Right.
the early signs are often really subtle.
Yeah.
Almost, you could dismiss them as coincidence or just,
Imagination.
yeah.
But with the Bell family, things escalated pretty quickly.
Yeah, from like the mundane to the just truly unsettling.
Right. Like starting with John Bell and his son Drew having these really strange animal sightings.
I was reading about that, a dog with a rabbit's head.
Yeah.
What?
I know.
And a gigantic bird.
Like huge, like extraordinary size.
It's like the natural order is just going haywire.
Totally. And I mean, those animal encounters, they definitely set this like really eerie tone for what's to come.
Oh yeah, they foreshadow all the craziness that happens inside the Bell house later on.
Right. So then you start getting these unexplained knocking sounds.
Oh yeah, just like rapping.
Yeah. And like gnawing noises.
Like something trying to get in.
Constant. Right. And the sounds of animals fighting.
But you can't see them.
Invisible animals. Yeah.
And chains dragging.
It's like just constant dread and anxiety. I can't even imagine.
Oh, it would be terrifying. And then it gets even worse when the kids start getting targeted.
Right.
Bed sheets being ripped off in the middle of the night.
And like actual physical attacks.
Yeah, slaps, pinches, stuck with pins.
Betsy, the youngest daughter, she seems to have gotten it the worst.
She was the main target, it seems like. And then around the same time, John Bell Sr., he starts having this paralysis in his mouth.
Yeah, it's like whatever this thing is, it becoming more and more aggressive.
More bold, right?
Yeah, and what makes it even creepier is that the entity, it's supposedly had these specific goals.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
it wanted to kill John Bell Sr.
What?
Yeah, and it wanted to stop Betsy from marrying this guy named Joshua Gardner.
So it's like a supernatural force with a personal vendetta.
Yeah.
That's so messed up.
Right, and then of course it gets a name.
Oh yeah, everyone knows the name.
Kate.
Kate.
Supposedly after old Kate Bat's witch.
And it would actually respond to that name, right?
Yeah, it's like giving this unseen force a name just made it
more real
and even scarier.
Oh yeah, and word got around, of course.
Right, like wildfire.
So people from the area started coming to see what was going on.
Yeah, and there were even early investigations, like by this family friend, James Johnston.
Oh yeah, I read about him. He was convinced it was a spirit.
Yeah, a spirit just like in the Bible, he said.
So that would have given the whole thing some serious weight.
Oh, totally.
Especially back then. And as more people came, the entity, it actually started talking to people. What?
Yeah, it would give these like really vague answers when people asked about its identity and stuff.
What did it say?
Well, one time it said it was a disturbed spirit. And it gave different reasons for why it was there. Like, it said it was connected to this Native American burial mound on the Bell property.
Oh, that's a common theme in ghost stories, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Disturbed burial grounds.
Yeah.
Super common.
Yeah.
And then it gets even weirder.
Weirder.
Yeah. So the Wikipedia entry mentions this treasure hunt.
A treasure hunt.
Yeah. It's like the spirit told Drew Bell and this guy Bennett Porter that there was buried treasure. They never found anything.
So it was like messing with them.
Right.
That's so strange.
I know.
Like, so the spirit, it's not just mean and scary.
Right.
It's also like playing tricks.
Right. Okay. So then you get these reports of even more bizarre abilities.
Like what?
Okay. So apparently this thing could repeat sermons word for word.
What?
Yeah, from churches that were miles away.
Okay, so it can be in multiple places at once.
Yeah, like at the same time sermons that were happening 13 miles apart.
That's insane. And, back then, church was like a huge part of life. So this idea that there's this, spirit thing listening in on sermons.
Yeah.
That must have been terrifying.
I know, it's like messing with the sacred.
Totally. And it wasn't just sermons, it also knew the Bible really well.
Oh, yeah. And apparently it loved to argue about theology.
Oh, my God.
I know. And then it would also gossip.
Gossip?
Yeah. It would tell people what was going on in other people's houses.
What? So it's like a supernatural busybody.
Right. And if people asked it about something that it didn't know, it would supposedly like go and check and come back and tell them.
So not only is it in multiple places at once, it's like it can travel instantly.
Right. Like teleporting ghost.
That's wild. And then there were these tests, right? That people tried to do to see if it was real.
Oh, yeah. Like John Johnston, James's son, he supposedly came up with this test involving his step-grandmother, who lived in North Carolina and spoke with a Dutch accent.
Yeah.
And the spirit supposedly like perfectly imitated her accent and everything.
That's a pretty good trick if it's true.
I know, right? Yeah. And then there's this story about this Englishman who came to investigate.
Okay.
And the spirit, it like imitated the voices of his parents who were back in England.
Wait, what?
Yeah. And then some people said that the witch actually went to England and messed with his parents.
No way, that's crazy.
Right.
So it can travel across the ocean too?
Apparently, and what's even weirder is that the spirit wasn't always mean.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There were all these stories about it being nice to Lucy John Bell's wife.
Like what?
It would bring her fresh fruit and sing hymns to her.
Oh, that's nice.
Right. And it was also pretty respectful to John Bell Jr.
Huh. So it had its favorites.
Yeah, it's so strange. But then things take a really dark turn when it starts threatening John Bell Sr.
Right. It called him Old Jack.
Yeah. And it said over and over again that it was going to kill him.
And then, of course, he dies.
Yeah. And the story goes that he was poisoned.
Poisoned.
Yeah. But there are different versions of how the poison was found.
Oh, really?
Yeah. In the Centennial Exposition account, it says they found it in the chimney.
Okay.
But Ingram and Richard Williams Bell, they say it was in a cupboard after John Sr. fell into a coma.
Huh. But either way, they tested the liquid on a cat.
Yeah, and the cat died.
And then the Bell Witch claimed it was responsible.
Yeah. Pretty creepy, right?
Super creepy. So after John Bell Sr. dies, the focus kind of shifts back to Betsy.
And her engagement to Joshua?
Right, but the witch kept interfering.
Yeah, threats, torment, just general chaos.
And eventually Betsy breaks off the engagement.
In 1821, right?
Yeah, and then the witch announces that it's leaving.
But it says it's coming back in 7 years.
Oh, so it's like setting a date.
Yeah, 1828.
And did it come back?
Well, some of the later accounts say it did.
Really?
Yeah, it appeared to Lucy and her sons, Richard and Joel. Well, it started doing its spooky stuff again, but the family, they didn't really encourage it this time.
Oh, they just ignored it.
Yeah, pretty much. And apparently it left again.
Huh. So maybe it feeds off attention.
Who knows? Okay, so now we get to one of the most famous parts of the story.
Okay.
Andrew Jackson.
Old Hickory himself.
The future president. Yeah.
What does he have to do with the Bell Witch?
Well, the story goes that he and his men were on their way to the Bell Farm to check out all the rumors.
Okay.
And their wagon suddenly stopped dead in its tracks.
Just stopped.
Yeah. And Jackson supposedly said something like, well, I guess it must be the witch.
Uh-huh.
And then a voice out of nowhere tells Jackson to let the wagon go.
Uh-huh.
And says, I'll see you tonight.
Creepy.
I know, right? And then there's this part about one of Jackson's guys who claimed he could control witches.
A witch lair.
Yeah, and the witch totally humiliated him.
How?
I don't know the details, but it sounds pretty bad.
And then Jackson was like, I'd rather fight the British again than deal with this.
Something like that, yeah.
Wow, what a story.
Right, but here's the thing. Researchers, they've looked into this.
Yeah.
And they haven't found any evidence to support Jackson ever going to the Bell Farm. Yeah, and Jackson was a pretty big deal even back then.
Yeah, he was already famous.
So it seems like if he had this encounter with the Bell Witch, people would have known about it.
Especially his enemies.
Exactly, they would have used it against him.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So it's most likely that this whole Jackson story is
a fabrication.
Yeah, but it's a good story.
Oh, it's a great story.
Okay, so let's move on to some of the early written accounts of the legend.
Okay.
So there's this journal entry from 1820 by this guy, John R. Bell.
Another Bell.
Yeah, and he talks about this young woman who lived near the Murphy residence.
Okay.
And she supposedly had this disembodied voice following her around.
Following her?
Yeah. And the voice wanted her to marry this neighbor.
That's weird.
Right. And this journal entry doesn't specifically mention the Bell Witch.
Right.
But it's really interesting that there was this other case of a talking voice.
Yeah, in the same area.
Yeah, around the same time.
So maybe there was something in the air back then. Who knows?
Right, okay. So then we have these articles that appeared in a couple of newspapers in 1856.
Okay.
They were attributed to the Saturday Evening Post.
Okay.
And they called the Bell Witch the Tennessee Ghost.
Catchy.
Right. And these articles, they said that the witch disappeared because Betsy and Joshua didn't get married.
Oh, interesting.
And they even suggested that maybe Betsy was doing ventriloquism.
Wait, what?
Yeah. But then we get this other account from Martin Van Buren Ingram.
The guy who wrote the book.
Yeah. In his book, he mentions that the Saturday Evening Post printed a retraction.
A retraction.
Yeah. About an earlier article from around 1849.
Okay.
That accused Betsy of being the source of the haunting.
Wow.
Yeah. And Ingram says that they printed the retraction because this woman, Mrs. Powell, she got really mad. And they did some tests that proved Betsy was innocent.
That's a lot of drama.
Right. And it shows how people were already debating the truth of the story even back then.
Yeah, the legend was already evolving.
Exactly. Okay, so now we have this murder trial in Tennessee in 1868.
A murder trial.
Yeah, the Clinard and Burgess trial.
Okay.
And the defense lawyers, they tried to use the Bell Witch legend to help their clients.
How?
Well, they said that their clients were bewitched by the victim.
Bewitched.
Yeah, and that the victim was the one who was doing the bewitching.
Oh, wow.
And there was this woman, Lucinda Rawls, who testified in the trial.
Okay.
And she said that the Bell Witch was a scapegoat that people used to explain anything they didn't understand.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. And Ingram, he connects this trial to another murder, the Smith murder.
Okay.
And he says that even though they didn't present any evidence of witchcraft in court, the lawyers definitely used the Bell Witch story to try to sway the jury.
So the legend was powerful enough to be used in a legal defense.
Yeah. Pretty crazy. Right?
Totally.
Okay. So what else do we have?
So then in 1880, there was this report of a haunted house in Springfield, Tennessee.
Another haunted house.
Yeah, and it was making these weird knocking sounds.
Like the Bell Witch?
Exactly. And the journalist who covered the story, he even compared it to the Bell Witch. So the legend was still fresh in people's minds.
Totally. But it turns out the knocking sounds were just coming from the homeowner's wife.
Oh, so not a ghost after all.
Nope. So even back then, not everything spooky was actually supernatural.
Good point. Okay, so what about the Centennial Exposition account?
Oh yeah, that one's from around 1882.
And what does it say?
Well, it's got some different details.
Like what?
Well, for one, it says that the spirit could speak multiple languages.
Oh, wow. A polyglot ghost.
Right. And it says that the spirit would set dogs on people.
What? That's scary.
Yeah. And this account, it doesn't say that the witch directly poisoned John Bell.
Okay.
It just says that they found a vial of poison.
Huh. So maybe someone else poisoned him and they blame the witch.
Yeah, maybe. And then there's this really weird part where the spirit says it's one of 7 entities.
7?
Yeah, with these weird names like Three Waters and Tenebarity and Black Dog.
Black Dog, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, that one pops up in a lot of folklore.
Huh, so maybe the Bell Witch was part of like a whole witch gang. That's a good band name, Witch Gang.
It is, right?
So what's next?
Okay, so Goodspeed's History of Tennessee from 1886. That one just gives a basic summary of the legend.
Okay.
It says the spirit was female and visible, but could talk and interact with things.
Okay.
And it says that at first people thought the spirit was good, but then it turned bad.
Oh yeah, classic trickster spirit.
Totally. Okay, so then we get to around 1890, and there are all these weird events happening.
Like what?
Well, there's the Hopkinsville coal falling incident.
What's that?
So apparently coal was just falling from the sky.
What?
Yeah, I know. And people thought it was the Bell Witch.
Seriously?
Yeah, and then there are all these strange things happening at Adams Station.
What kind of things?
Okay, so women and horses were disappearing.
Disappearing.
Yeah. And then this sack of corn was seen floating in the air.
A floating sack of corn.
I know, right? And then it gets even crazier.
Crazier.
Yeah, there were reports of invisible fights and spontaneous fires.
Invisible fights.
You know, and then there's a story about a one-eyed black man who told someone where to find buried treasure.
Okay, that's definitely a tall tale.
Right. And even the people reporting these stories, they were skeptical.
They were.
Yeah, they used phrases like mulatonish and fishy flavor to describe them.
So they were basically saying these stories are bogus.
Pretty much.
Okay, so now let's talk about the guy who really shaped the Bell Witch legend as we know it.
Martin Van Buren Ingram.
The OG Bell Witch chronicler.
Right. So Ingram was a newspaper editor, and he wrote this book in 1894 called An Authenticated History of the Famous Bell Witch.
Ooh.
And this book, it's basically the first full-length account of the haunting, and has been super influential.
Yeah, it's like the Bible of Bell Witch lore.
Right, and the book even includes a letter from J. Allen Bell.
A descendant of the Bells.
Yeah, and in the letter, he says that the family waited to tell their story until the last immediate family member died.
Which was in 1890.
Right, so that kind of adds to the book's credibility.
Yeah, like they were protecting the family secret.
But there's also a lot of controversy around Ingram's book.
Controversy.
Yeah, some people think he made a lot of stuff up.
Really?
Yeah, like he talks about this diary that belonged to Richard Williams Bell,
Okay.
but no one's ever seen this diary.
So it could be fake?
Right. And the manuscript for Ingram's book has never been found either.
Huh. That's suspicious.
And there are some parts of the book that seem anachronistic, like there are these Masonic themes that don't really fit the time period.
So maybe Ingram was just trying to make the story more interesting.
Yeah, maybe. But some people, they see Ingram's book as a valuable piece of folklore.
Yeah, it tells us a lot about how people thought back then.
Exactly. Okay, so the Bell Witch legend didn't just disappear after Ingram's book.
Of course not.
In fact, there was this prophecy that the witch would return in 1903.
And did it?
Nope. The local newspaper even made fun of the whole thing when nothing happened.
So people were starting to get a little more skeptical.
Yeah, but the stories kept going.
Right.
So in 1934, Charles Bailey Bell, a grandson of John Bell Jr., he wrote a book.
Okay.
And in his book, he tells stories that he heard from his great-aunt Betsy.
The original target of the witch.
Yeah. And he includes another version of the Andrew Jackson story.
Another one.
Yeah. And he also says that the witch prophesied to return in 1935. Nothing happened.
Of course.
But then in 1937, there were all these weird events happening on the old Bell farm.
Which included the Bell Witch Cave by then.
Right. So there were strange noises and this paper-like object that was moving around on its own.
Okay.
And there was even faint music.
Spooky.
Right. And then there was this incident during an Epworth League wiener roast.
A wiener roast.
Yeah, they were having this gathering near the cave.
Okay.
And people saw this mysterious figure on the cliff above them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it caused a huge commotion. But the local newspaper said it was just moonlight reflecting off a rock.
Oh, so not the Bell Witch?
Well, maybe. But the people who were there, they didn't believe the newspaper.
They thought it was the witch.
Yeah. So even then, people were still connecting these weird events to the legend.
Okay, so what about the rocking chair incident?
Oh, yeah. That one happened in 1965.
What happened?
So this antique rocking chair on the property started talking.
The chair was talking.
Yeah. And then they found a pearl buckle nearby.
Huh. That's weird.
Right? It's like the witch was trying to connect with people through objects.
Maybe. Oh, okay. What else do we have?
Okay, so there's this woman named Bonnie Hainline, and she tells this story about exploring the cave as a kid in 1944.
Okay.
And while she was in the cave, her lantern went out.
Oh, no, that's scary.
Right, and then she ended up finding these escaped fugitives hiding in the cave.
What?
Yeah. So it's not exactly a ghost story, but it's still creepy.
Yeah, and it's connected to the cave, so people still associate it with the Bell Witch.
Exactly. Then in 1977, we have this story about some soldiers from Fort Campbell.
Okay.
They were exploring the cave, and one of them said something grabbed him.
Oh, wow, that's terrifying.
Right, and then in 1986, some journalists spent the night in the cave, and they reported hearing strange noises and a scream.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and then there's this lighter story from 1987 about a gas station owner near the cave.
Okay.
Who claimed he met a talking rabbit.
A talking rabbit.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
That's pretty funny.
Right, so the Bell Witch legend, it's got all these different sides to it.
Yeah. Scary, funny, weird, everything.
Exactly. But, of course, not everyone believes in the Bell Witch.
Right. There are plenty of skeptics.
Yeah, like Ben Radford and Brian Dunning.
Okay.
They point out that there's no real evidence to support the haunting.
Yeah, just stories and anecdotes.
Right, and Radford, he says that the burden of proof is on the people who believe in the witch.
Which makes sense.
Right, and Dunning, he thinks that the whole story is basically made up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he thinks it was just a regular old story that got more and more exaggerated over time.
Okay, so what about Joe Nickel?
Oh, he's a paranormal investigator, and he came up with this idea called poltergeist faking syndrome.
It's this theory that sometimes people who think they're being haunted are actually causing the disturbances themselves.
Without realizing it.
Right. And some people think that's what was happening with Betsy Bell.
Oh, so maybe she was moving things and making noises without knowing it.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
But then there's Amy Fluker.
Okay.
And she says that whether the Bell Witch was real or not, the legend still tells us a lot about American culture.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it shows us what people believed in and what they were afraid of.
And the story is still popular today.
Oh, totally. It's been in movies and TV shows and music.
Yeah, like the Blair Witch Project.
Right.
Even though that one's fictional, it definitely has that same vibe of being terrorized by something unseen in the woods.
Totally. And then there's an American Haunting, which is directly based on the Bell Witch legend.
And bands like Merciful Fate and Bell Witch have used the story in their music.
Right, and there are tons of books about it, too.
So the Bell Witch is still going strong.
Wait, so to wrap up, we've covered a lot of ground today.
Yeah, we've gone through all the different versions of the story.
And we've talked about the impact on the Bell family and the community and the skeptical viewpoints.
And even after all this time, we still don't know for sure what really happened.
Right, was it a ghost or a hoax or mass hysteria or something else entirely?
Who knows? But the fact that we're still talking about it over 200 years later.
It just shows how powerful the story is.
It's a classic piece of American folklore.
Right, it reflects our beliefs and our fears and our love of a good, scary story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So to leave you with something to think about, what do you think is the most likely explanation for the Bell Witch?
Yeah, and what does your explanation say about how we as humans make sense of the unknown?
The Bell Witch legend, it's a window into the past and a reflection of ourselves.
That definitely makes you think.
That's what we're here for, right?
That's right. So until next time, happy hunting.
Stay spooky.
See ya.